I think happy is a pretty low goal. I mean, first of all, there's going to be lots of times in your marriage where you are seriously not happy. And sometimes that's going to be because you're having conflict with your partner, but sometimes it's going to be because all hell's broken loose around you. And then if you judge the success of your marriage on your happiness, then the same thing happens if you judge your success in life on the basis of your happiness. What do you have when it's nothing but suffering? And that's going to be plenty of your life. And so the whole orientation of that question in that sense is wrong. What you want to have in your marriage is, I would say, first and foremost, like a scrupulous honesty. And I don't just mean that you tell each other the truth, because you can be brutal with the truth. I mean the kind of honesty that's devoted towards thriving in love, And you want to act nobly in your relationship. You want to be reliable and productive and generous and then if you're lucky, now and then, you might be happy. And you might have a clear enough conscience so that in those rare moments where you are truly happy, you can also enjoy it without guilt. And so you aim at something a lot higher than happiness, and then you welcome it if it deigns to land on you for brief moments of time. So.
I never figured you for a Catholic.
Yeah, well, I've got all the guilt. It's not a stretch, man.
That is, that Catholic aspect is very important. In the Italian culture, there is a concept known as divorce Italian style. And divorce Italian style is when you murder your husband or wife because there's no other way to get out of the marriage. You are in it. And I actually think this is a very important thing. I mean, I'm half joking. I'm half joking. If I ever end up separated in my marriage, it will be at knife point by my wife. It will not be, because I think if you both go into a marriage agreeing on what it is, on what the institution is, and you say, look, we're in it, we're not going to leave it, this is, no matter how terrible and miserable it might seem at times, we're just going to be in it, for better or for worse. Yeah. That gives you a level of comfort and security and true freedom that will allow you to weather those storms. And you also don't need to pursue selflessness exactly. In a way, you're sort of pursuing the opposite. You're pursuing a sort of selfishness in that you are viewing your spouse as part of your flesh. A man and a woman leave their families. They come together in one flesh. I think of my wife, sweet little Elisa, truly as a part of my flesh. And so even when I do all sorts of very annoying behaviors, and Elisa yells at me and she says, Mike, do the dishes, go in there, clean up your clothing, why are you doing, you're working too late, why are you at backstage on that, Mike? I think to myself that this is good. I need to accept this with saintly patience. This is very virtuous to do. And that last point that Jordan made, this is very important. That Catholic guilt is so good because in the good times you will be absolutely blissful in your marriage, but in the bad times, and this is true in all aspects of life, you know that suffering can be a sanctifying experience. And if you react to it in a way that is with patience and that is edifying and that is not merely complaining and debasing, that can be a wonderful thing. And even through difficult moments, that will bring you even closer together until your wife kills you in the end. And anyway, you had a good run.
So, like Michael, if my marriage ends, it will be because my wife murders me, both because she is a doctor and can get away with it, and and also because the life insurance money is just extraordinary. But, to take, I think, something that hasn't been taken, it's hard to be the last person except for Jeremy, and who cares what Jeremy has to say? So one thing that I think people tend to fall prey to is that men tend to think that the things that their wife wants are the things that they would want, and women tend to think that the things their husband wants are the things that they would want. And failing to recognize that men and women are wildly different and have very different priorities leads to some pretty bad things. I have so many stories that are like, the purest example of this that I can think of is one time I was my wife came to me and she had some sort of problem. And I did what men do. I said, okay, so here's a bunch of solutions. And men, right.
Oh.
Yeah, I see that, Candace, so that's correct.
Is it
And-
really a bad
That's a
idea?
bad
Men,
idea.
because men are solution-oriented, right? If they hear a problem, men like to fix things. They like machines, they like to fix things. And so my wife presented me with the problem, and I said the natural, normal, logical thing that men do. And I said, here's a solution, and she got mad. And I realized at that point that what she didn't want was a solution. What she wanted was for me to hear her.
Yes.
To hear her. Yes, the comfort. The emotion. Even I. And so at that point, we set up a rule in my home. And the rule goes like this. When my wife comes to me with a problem, I say to her, is this a solutions problem or is this a conversation where you want me to hear you? And my wife has been kind enough, knowing my shortcomings, to actually abide by this rule and answer the question straight, that she doesn't actually want the problem solved. One other example of this sort of disconnect, because I think the truth is that I think that what women actually want, to speak for women as I'm an expert. I mean, I could be one. I mean, it could be anything. What women predominantly want is to be heard and protected by the man that they are with. They want to be heard, and they want to be understood, and they want to be protected by the man that they are with. And because that is the best characteristic about the husband and father. And what men want is respect, food, and sex. Those are the things that men want. It isn't that difficult. We're real simple. So all you ladies are like, man's a mystery. He's not a mystery. I promise you, you provide him all three of these things, and he will be a happy camper. My wife came to me at one point, and she said to me, she's on the phone with a person who shall remain nameless, a female friend of hers who shall remain nameless. And this woman, her husband, she'd been working a lot, and her husband had been working a lot, and she was in the middle of a very difficult work project with a bunch of kids at home, and her husband would come home, and he'd be taking care of the kids. And he was getting grumpier and grumpier about this, as men are apt to do. And she was talking with my wife on the phone, and she said, what should I do? And my wife said, you should buy him some flowers, get him a card, tell him how much what he's doing means to you. And I motioned desperately, you need to, it was on speakerphone, which it shouldn't have been. And I motioned desperately to mute the phone. And she muted the phone, and I said, no, you need to bleep him. And I said to my wife, you're thinking like a woman would think, right? Because if you want to feel appreciated, you don't want that. What you want me to do is buy you some flowers and write you a card and talk about how wonderful you are and how grateful I am. And my wife, being a woman of good sense and practicality, nodded firmly, took off the mute, and said, go home and sleep with your husband. And it was good for the marriage, as it turns out.
Can I make a comment on all of this? I would just like to make a comment observing all of this. No, it's not what you expect. This whole dialogue would be inconceivable at any left-wing place. And the reason is we're real. They hate reality. None of this discussion, especially the last comment. No, I could prove it. This will take just literally under a minute. About 10 years ago, I wrote a column every week, so it's 20 years of columns. 1 year, I wrote a 2-part column on the subject of if you're if a wife is not in the mood. It was a 2-part column. And the whole thesis, which I put in such gentle phraseology.
Go home and bleep him.
If your husband is a good man, if you respect him, if he treats you beautifully, then don't only allow your mood to determine whether you sleep with him. That was the thesis of it. Of course, there are times when obviously that will determine, but not always. Just as mood cannot determine almost anything good that we do. I don't determine whether I go to work based on my mood. The Daily Kos wrote, headline, you can see it, it's still up there, Dennis Prager advocates marital rape.
Yeah.
They hate reality.
So one of the practices that my wife and I have that really helped us a tremendous amount more recently when we were both recovering from very serious illnesses is we had instituted a policy of regular dates. And probably 25 years ago, maybe longer. And that was at her impetus. I was resistant to the idea to begin with, but not for long. And yeah, and so to follow up on your comment, it's like, put in some bloody effort and get in the mood. Both of you, right? Both of you. Yeah. Because it's not, when you're exhausted with kids, when you've worked all day, and you're kind of up to here and you're tired, it's easy to drop the intimate part of your marriage to number 11 on a list of 10 priorities. And then that's just not a good long-term strategy. And so when you're an adult with adult responsibilities, you have to carve out the time and you have to make a willful effort. And as Dennis just pointed out, that's way too important to have it depend on something like unpredictable and arbitrary whim. And on the part of both partners.
Yeah.
So
Could I